The landscape of Maine is typical Northeast. Tall pines and fir trees, lush greenery, rolling hills. But smack dab in the middle of all of this agriculture is a former farm in the town of Freeport whose 150-year-old curse has created a tourist attraction known as the Desert of Maine.
Almost surreal. Amid all the pine trees and forests and everything else, you find this patch of desert sand in the middle of a forest. It's very odd.
So how on earth could a desert exist so far up in the Northeast? Locals know the answer. It all happened after a woman disavowed a dying man's final wish. The story begins in the early 1800s when William Grayson, a widower and owner of the Tuttle Farm, married Hattie.
The second wife had a son, and he had a son, and they were raising their sons together.
After many years, Thomas Grayson took ill. Before he died, he made Hattie promise that when she died, the farm would go to his son David, not her son Jonah. Thomas mistrusted lawyers, so there are no legal records reflecting his will, but unfortunately, he did trust Hattie.
When she got ready to die, she changed the will and she left it to her son.
It was this final betrayal of her husband's wish that would ruin the farm forever. 14 years after Thomas's death, Hattie noticed a saucer-sized spot of white sand by the barn. 2 weeks later, it turned into a small mound. In a few months, it turned into a dune.
1897, the first patch of sand supposedly was about 8 feet, and year after year, there just was more sand, and by 1919, there were over 50 acres of sand, and the families just up and left.
Over the next 50 years, the desert grew to include 800 acres of valleys and dunes. It was worthless.
Nobody really knew what was happening. They really thought the sand just was bubbling right out of the ground.
The sand eventually covered up buildings, like this spring house which sits under 8 feet of sand. And take a close look at these trees. Actually, these are the tree tops.
This is probably a 40, 50-foot oak tree, and it's half buried. The roots of this oak tree are down here at the level of the land.
Still, it is unusual that of all the farms in Freeport, only this one was buried under sand. And stranger yet, the desert landscape begins and ends within the boundaries of the former Tuttle Farm. But here's another secret. At night, this land turns from cursed to haunted.
Yet Hutchinson was not the most sadistic colonist or estate owner. That honor is reserved for the woman known as the White Witch of Rose Hall. Rose Hall Plantation was one of the largest estates in colonial Jamaica. It was built in the mid-1700s, but it gained its reputation from only one person, Annie Palmer. Born in Haiti, Annie married John Palmer at age 18 and moved to Jamaica with a wealthy older man. John Palmer died within a few years, leaving Annie the sole owner of Rose Hall.
Annie was born in Haiti of an Irish and English ancestry, but she learned voodoo. And so she brought voodoo to Jamaica.
The Jamaican form of West African magic is called obia. Haitian voodoo is considered far more evil. In addition to practicing black magic, Annie Palmer was a cruel and sadistic slave owner. She not only brutalized her workers, she would make lovers of the more handsome slaves as well. But the favors of the mistress were two-edged, for sometimes she killed her lovers in the act of physical gratification. It would only be so long before the slaves felt forced to take action. They lay in wait for her inside the great house, followed her to her bedroom that was the source of so much pain and death, and there did to Annie Palmer what she had done to countless others. Annie's tomb lies close to the great house, but it is not a quiet grave.
Come and see. There is a female, a spirit of all spirits, and her name is Lilith. And she was at first with Adam, in the hour when Adam was created. The Zohar, chapter 3, verse 19.
One of the traditions is that they were making love together, and Lilith said, you can't take the missionary position all the time and be on top. I deserve to be on top too. And if you insist upon this, I'm out of here. And she flew away and she began to shack up with other demons, and her life continued in the world of demons thereafter. Quite a story we hear about Lilith.
She roams in the world and finds children and kills them. She roams the world at night and makes sport with men and causes them to emit seed and afflicts them with disease. The Zohar, chapter 1, verse 19.
Lilith is a succubus. That is a female demon that seduces men in their sleep and creates demons. Now, these two things, the child stealing and the seducer, both flow into Lilith. And she somehow merges with another demoness called Lamashtu and acquires the characteristics of a child-stealing demon, which is basically the cause of sudden infant crib death, as we call it.
In the medieval period, they would put an amulet in the door or the walls of the bedroom to protect it from Lilith. And on the amulet, the word was Lilith Avi, which means Lilith, go away, Lilith be gone.
In fact, the legend of Lilith remains embedded as a forgotten code in the modern world, any time that a parent sings a baby to sleep.
Our term lullaby may come from that. Lilith Avi is the origin of a lullaby, because if Lilith is be gone, a child can have the lullaby, sleep all night in safety and security.
Tradition states that after banishing Lilith, God creates another wife for Adam, this time from his rib to show man's dominance. But Lilith has regained her status in popular culture. In the Women's Music Festival Lilith Fair, and in feminist books and journals that bear her name.
Soldiers on the cold stone, days and nights at 31.
Sweltered venom, sleeping got, boiled thou first in the charmed pot.
Eye of newt, toe of frog, wool of bat and tongue of dog.
Adder's fork and blindworm sting, lizard's leg and owlet's wing.
Nose of turpin, tartar's lips.
In the cauldron boil and bake.
Liver of blaspheming Jew, gall of goat and slips of ewe.
All right, let's see what to do.
Keep away! The sow is mine.
Fuck me!
Fuck me!